Okay, and you're a Salinas resident.
Salinas resident. Lived here in Creek Ridge since it was built, 1990.
So you came to this meeting. What were the issues that concerned you?
The issue that concerns me is the homeless shelter that's being built right next to our neighborhood. It's being built right next to the brand new soccer fields, and I understand that homeless people, it's not a good place to be, but in the mix are people that have mental issues, drug issues, and being right next to our children where they're going to be playing, hypodermic needles in the soccer field, homeless encampments along our trails and creeks and our public spaces, and it doesn't sound like Salinas has given this very much thought by putting something like this near our neighborhood. We have a Safeway that already has issues with shoplifting, and that's going to hurt this business, and the laws are set up to where, we've had issues where people have come in and they've loaded up the shopping carts and they're taken out the door. I mean, what do they got to lose if they aren't caught? And then the next day, 2 days later, the same guy is out there selling the liquor out on the parking lot.
What do you think of the city's response here today?
I think the city set up this meeting and they were going to fill up this whole agenda with all their issues without really talking to the neighborhood, who's gathered here tonight, because this is the number one on everybody's mind. But they want to fill up with what Public Works is doing and give us some sort of long song and dance pony show instead of really talking about the issue that everybody was here gathered for tonight. And finally, they start letting us talk, but they put city officials up there that kind of filibuster so the public can't really speak and get the answers that they need.
Right.
And the last thing that was asked tonight, how can we stop this thing? And they're basically saying, well, they aren't really wanting to help us out on that.
So, right. The city and county are arguing, like, this is county land. It's going to be advantageous to put it here in particular. What do you think of that?
Well, there's got to be other county land too that's out there available, and there's plenty of, if Taylor Farms want this shelter, to move the homeless from downtown over to the Creek Ridge area, then we're going to get the influx of it. We're going to feel the brunt of it. And when we found out that this was going to be in our area, I had my next door neighbor called somebody over there in South Salinas and said, hey, they're going to put this here. How about you guys put it over there in South Salinas? And they go, no way. So I know that people say not in my backyard, but you know what? It's not appropriate to put this right near our neighborhood because now we're going to get the brunt of this.
We have 2 jails anyway, right?
I'll ask you about that after. I think that's, anything else you'd like to say?
I'm just saying that it's not a good idea to put a homeless shelter near our neighborhood. Go over to Coral Street in Santa Cruz and see what happens over there, and we just do not want to see it come to our nice neighborhood. As you can see, people go to work, they work hard, the mortgages are high to pay the mortgages, and come here and have to deal with this now as well. They have homeless running up and down our street, breaking into our homes, into our vehicles, because if they build it, they are going to come. They're going to come to our neighborhood, and that's what we're trying to stop.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. So, actually, can I get you to spell your name again?
Villegas. V as in Victor, Illegas.
And you go by Tony?
Yeah, I go by Tony.
Okay. And you're the council member for District 6? Okay.
Yes,
so, how'd it go?
Well, I think we had a great turnout. A lot of people came up here, and they had a lot of good questions they asked. The community leaders and the staff as well. As far as because there's been a lot of disinformation out there that's been out, and it wasn't true. And the city should have been out in front of it a lot sooner, getting that information out at the right time for the residents, so we didn't have a lot of people with the wrong information.
What are some of the examples of the wrong information?
They said that this homeless shelter is built, it's a done deal, everything. What it was an MOU that we signed with the county for $12.5 million to put the application in. The county got the money, it's on county property, and they're the ones that are going to be deciding, along with, I think it's the mayor said like a panel of 11 people where one vote on that, and it's going to be divvied up in different areas in our community. It's just not for a homeless shelter.
And why this location? Just your explanation on that.
Like Supervisor Phillip, they went around and they looked at the zoning and everything, and looked at the proximity to neighborhoods, and this was the one that probably fit the best because Creek Bridge is about half a mile away. You have Costa Plaza, which is about a third of a mile away from the proposed site, and it's close to services, and it was, like I said, zoned for that.
Okay. Now it got heated during the meeting, and a lot of people will say, if the shelter does get built here, a lot of people say, my city didn't listen to me. You know, they're just going to steamroll over us.
Well, the thing is like I said, we're one vote out of 11 that are going to be on this committee deciding what's going to happen with that money. And like the disinformation is that shelter it's a done deal. It's going to be built, and nothing's going to change. And that's not the case. There's going to be a lot more meetings, and they're going to have committee meetings to decide what they're going to do with the $12.5 million. So that's going to get divvied up. So nothing's set in stone, and that's what a lot of the misinformation out there was, as far as like with some of the groups that they were spewing the information out and not getting the facts, and when they did, and then a lot of the people were basing their position on false information.
I mean, do you understand some of the concerns, though, like residents have about placing a homeless shelter near Constitution Park? I used to play soccer in Constitution Park all the time, and if there were a lot of homeless there, maybe they could.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same concerns that the leaders have that are making the decisions, but the homeless is, from what I understand, it was going to be a 24-hour emergency shelter. So, and the main ones that use that downtown right now, 2/3 of them, about 70% are women and children, school-aged children. Those are the people. We're not talking about the people that come down from Soledad Street that get serviced by, say, First Methodist Church or something like that, coming down here by Dorothy's Kitchen. I mean, you were here and you heard the information that Dorothy's Kitchen is closing down. It's not true. So those are the things, and we had to weigh that out. I don't know if the county has other alternatives at what they're going to do, but they're in the driver's seat on this.
Well, I mean, this has gone so contentious that there is a recall effort against you. Like, do you think that's fair?
I mean, I'm one vote on the council. I think they filed the recall like at least twice. It's failed twice. I don't know what the status is. So I don't worry about that.
Anything else like that?
No, I'm just glad that the community came out and voiced their concerns and show up to the meetings whenever we do have more decisions made on this money, especially with the committee. I don't even know what the committee is going to be comprised of, other than it's 11 people and stuff. And I just urge people to reach out to the city, to the county, to the electeds, and get the correct information versus a lot of the misinformation that's going on out there.
All right, Tony. All right.
So if this shelter does happen, you'll have maybe 20 new people, right? Because the other one is supposed to close down, or is it still going to close down?
As far as I know, it's supposed to, the warming shelter, I don't know when that's closing down because it's run by the county. Okay, it's on county property.
Right.
But they're trying to get one built somewhere. As far as having it warming 24 hours emergency, basically, mainly to help out the women and children.
Right,
okay.
Right. Well, in March of last year, the city and county entered a memorandum of understanding. As soon as the permanent shelter is operational, the temporary shelter will close and everybody will come over there.
Yeah, it would close down.
So with only 20 new people and at least $4.5–6 million worth of building, what are we doing with the rest of everybody else?
That's what they're working on, as far as with services and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know what that money is going to be allocated to those homeless people. I don't know yet.
Okay. So in services is a big hitting point at this moment. Today, the chief said that they started the hot officer as well as something in Chinatown. Well, what happened today in Chinatown was they took up 3 encampments. And basically that space is to be left vacant the rest of the time. They said they're going to start doing another encampment per day until everybody's gone. So how are we going to connect people with services if people have signed up for services and they're in a tent in Chinatown but yet they're still told they have to leave.
You know, a lot of the people, what they do is they get information, the cards, things like that, to where they can get the services.
Right.
I don't know as far as when they move them out, they're not, you know,
Right. Well, if the solution is sign up for services and you'll be placed with services and housing, in the meantime of that, if they've already got that green card says I've signed up for services, how do we help those people instead of turning them out?
What do you mean, help them get services?
Well,
or
the system is taking its time, right? Everybody's in a line, everybody's waiting, and they're waiting, and then the police say, well, you can't be here, and they say, but I signed up for services, you know, what else am I supposed to do so that I can be left in peace?
Peace in there. That's why we're trying to work with the service providers to give some place where people can go.
Right. Well, with Martin versus Boise, there is a thing about public space. You can't ticket people for public space. And what I'm urging you as a council member is maybe try to bring forth a new policy where we do have sanctioned encampments. You know, sanctuary camps. You know, you could look at models like Hope Village in San Jose. You know, they have trash area, restroom area, pantry area. Everybody has their own space. It's almost like tiny homes type of situation,
right.
Which is budget. You know, I'm not even worried about budget. I'm just worried about a piece of property that they can call an address because people need a permanent address. Mm-hmm. You know, how do we separate the harmless from the homeless? Because obviously there's plenty of people that we worry about. But, you know, the people that we say we want to help, how do we follow through with that?
As far as just contacting electeds and getting policy pushed forward.
Okay.
You know, on that. I mean, that's the best way, you know, because like what you're talking about in San Jose, if it works and, you know, it's not to the point to where it's actually helping people out, then, you know, it's something that we can look at.
Okay, and I mean, I guess can you follow up with the police department? I'll send you an email of the video of today, and you know, you can see what policy is happening. And if you turn everybody out from Chinatown, where do you think they're going to go if we don't have a catch for them to go?
It's like exploding a bomb. They're going to go everywhere.
Yeah, right. Well, and if you notice, the last few years they put a fence around every vacant lot, which forced them onto the sidewalk. And then they say you can't do that either. You know, are we setting people up for failure? That has to be a question. Is the system actually working, or is the system failing us? And are we misspending so much money to make the system fail?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I you know, if it's a systematic thing to the point to where, you know, we're trying to make it harder to, you know, be homeless, that's, you know, that's not what we're trying to do. I know the city's policies and things of that nature, like the anti-camping thing, I think that got overturned.
Yes, so 7 to 7, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
And people are supposed to be connected with services.
Yeah, so, and a lot of the services that a lot of the people need, you know, like I said, I've told people this before, the county is going to have to take a lead on a lot of this. So a lot of the things, as far as the money goes, I think a lot of that $12.5 million is going to go for services.
Okay. If you're interested, do some research on the city ordinance, 771. I think it was February last year they put it in. And I think in the policies and procedures, they're supposed to sign people up for services before they evict them, and they never do. Okay. You know, so if they do a posting, they come immediately, the 3 days later, and excavate. But in there, we're missing step 2, which is connect them with services.
Okay.
So, you know, it would behoove you as a council member to say, we need to follow our laws, you know, and what's going on with this? How can we make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a liability situation? Because there are lawsuits proven, you know, and the city doesn't need to lose money, the city just needs to behave better. You know, I mean, are we discriminating against them? Because the thing that trips me out is those 3 encampments had a couple people apiece in them, right? Mm-hmm. And so now they're homeless, right? Because they can't go back to that spot, and they lost all their stuff. They still need to exist, right? So that's the system point that we need another direction with.
Okay.
So I appreciate you thinking about that.
All right, thanks, Wes.
Right on.
You're a Salinas resident?
I'm a Salinas resident. I'm a former school board member here.
Okay. I'll let you just go. What did you think?
Oh, sure. So, you know, this room was packed with people who live in this area and are very concerned about the shelter that they're proposing to bring at the mouth of in East Salinas over by the 2 county jails, which we already have. Now, the residents here have been very unfavorably characterized as not wanting to help out people who are homeless. But that isn't the major problem. The major problem that we see is that they're bulldozing homeless out of the downtown, and then they're just sort of taking them from one locale and sticking them somewhere else and saying that we are the problem. They're creating communities where they are really condensing and clustering these type of services together, and that is no solution. Farm workers are not NIMBYs. This working class is not. We've seen an uptick in crime in this area. Just Friday alone, we had an officer-involved shooting over at the local Safeway, which used to be one of the safest Safeways to go to, and gunfire, multiple shots, many missed, but could have hit someone else. My son was out there that day. I had family out there. I mean, there were a lot of residents. It's become very unsafe, and their attitude towards this community, number one, was they didn't want to hear the community. So this community meeting tonight, not even on the agenda, they didn't even have the homeless shelter on the agenda. They wanted to talk about glow and grow or something, but they didn't want to talk about what this community wanted to discuss, and that is the fact that they have not had any meetings. There's been no transparency regarding any of this, and that they are causing more blight. This is a former redevelopment zone, which those were taken away by the governor because the monies were not being used properly. And I'd like to know, so where is the oversight on this heat funding that ultimately cities are not going to misspend and create more new blighted areas in the future, because that is their goal here. This used to be such a pristine river, and now it is infested with garbage. And there are people living in the river that are grown men. There was an incident at Virginia Rockabardin just yesterday they had to go into shutdown because it was a grown individual man who went into Virginia Rockabardin there with the school. So this is something that the residents here are very much concerned about, and the approach that they're taking, which is a very non-transparent, under the rug, taking votes because they are making quick decisions in order to get funding, and they're not taking into consideration at all the community at large. And to say that everybody else out there in Monterey County is looking to put these sites, they're not. Pacific Grove hasn't requested any money. Pebble Beach hasn't requested any money. Monterey hasn't requested money. Along 68, they're not requesting any money. They're looking for the east side of Salinas, the Greek Bridge area next to the 2 jails, to bring these projects to. So it's just bad planning. And I will add that in 2008, in that very same site, they attempted to put up a prison, a state prison, and this community fought them back, and now they're back. They want to do something great with that site. Why don't they put a university at that site? We could really all benefit from a university. And why doesn't the rest of the city take its share in dealing with the situation at hand, which is services for the homeless, permanent housing, and a path to viability, to job, and to stability. But these shelters are not that. These shelters are simply move it from the downtown where they are developing and bulldoze them out, bulldoze them into the river, and bulldoze them into this community, and let's just sort of stick them over there with the farm workers, because after all, farm workers don't really matter. Well, farm workers have a right to a nest egg too. Farm workers have a right to equity in their home. Farm workers pay taxes, and farm workers have a right to utilize those funds to send their kids to college or to retire on when they can no longer work in the fields. So if they're going to call a community of working class and farm working communities NIMBYs, I challenge them on that. There are other places, and this is definitely not that community that they've described. This is a very hard-working community who take pride in each other and their neighbors and in their schools. We don't want needles. On the soccer fields, we've already running into all of that. So they're not talking to us. They didn't want to talk to us tonight. They didn't let people line up to answer the questions. And I'll add that Councilmember Tony Villegas lunged at me from across the table at one point where I was sitting and had to be pulled back by his wife, and there are multiple witnesses to his attempting to attack me. Why? Because I'm speaking out and he doesn't want the community to be informed. Well, I live here, and as a community leader, it's my responsibility to make sure that my community is informed, especially when they give misinformation.
If you saw the agenda as you came in, the way this is going to run, we're going over the introductions, and this the meeting norms, and then we're going to have a short presentation by the police, about 4 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, then one by the Public Works, and then we're going to have one for community development, which is going to be about 5 to 6 minutes. And then we're going to break you up into collaborative groups, and that's what these posters are there for, where you'll be talking with your neighbors as far as things that are going, that the city needs to address, issues that are not going well, and then things that are going well. Then we'll get them all together, and then we'll, after about a half hour, we'll get back, and then we'll see what's the same, what are the sames, and we'll address those ones. And that will be for the priority. Then from 7:08 to 7:27, you'll have a Q&A, and that's where your cards will come into play. And then we'll be discussing that for about 27 minutes, and then we'll wrap it up about 7:28, 7:30. The meeting will end at 7:30. It's a new day, and I treat everybody the same. I'm not afraid of to discuss things with people. I know we don't agree on certain things and stuff. So what we're going to do now is we're going to... Yes?
Okay, because I am trying to interpret simultaneously, I would appreciate if people would speak loud enough or use the microphone so that I can hear. I can hear you perfectly well, but when people speak out here, I can't hear you. So you just speak loud enough to hear you or use the microphone to hear you. Thank you. Is there anyone got
Yep. There's a gentleman up at the front. How many copies did you make? Anna?
There's some up here. There's not enough copies for everyone. But there's probably one per table.
Yeah.
Who
So,
else needs one? Here, send it to me, favor, make sure. I think we can have one here.
I know, we don't have enough.
There's only enough for one per table.
Yeah.
okay, is there anyone else that'd like to add something to the norms? Meeting norms? Okay. Yeah, that should pass it out. Yeah, we're going to stick to the agenda. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn it over to the police for a short presentation.
Sir?
Everybody hear me? First of all, I want to apologize. Chief is going to be here and actually do the quick presentation for the 3 minutes that we have, but she's in a meeting with the DA's office, so once she's finished, she'll be coming up here. Well, my name is Manny Martinez. I'm the Assistant Chief for Patrol. We have 2 Assistant Chiefs. Chief's Alberto Felice, who's not here right now, he's in drug investigation. And I've got my commander over here with me. So with the 3 minutes, I was going to try to highlight some of the things in the District 6 area, kind of the area that you're in, right? So I think one of the big questions that always comes up, and I think, how many here are linked up to next door? Okay, great. So some of the things that come up with next door is some of the prowlers that are going on from like midnight to 5 in the morning. What you do is you find them coming off the trails. You come down the creek and everything, and so we were made aware of it because there was a lot of thefts going on, a lot of breaking into vehicles, and it popped up on next door, and a couple of the community people got a hold of me and let me know what was going on. A couple of issues that came up with there was that they were making the police reports, but they didn't think anybody was doing any investigations. So I followed up, and what I found out was, yes, we're doing the reports, but when reports get pulled out, they get signed by a sergeant, and they're not assigned to anybody unless we have suspects, description, vehicles, or something we can follow up. So with the community on next door, I basically said that if you do a report, especially if you got video, to go ahead and notify me. And what I've been doing with that video is we've been showing it all 3 watches, our day swings and mid, to see if we can identify them. If not, then we go ahead and assign it to the officer to follow up an investigation, so that way that your case is being investigated. The second thing we've done is with the swing shift at midnight, working from about 1 to 7 in the morning, we developed a couple of team projects where anywhere between 12 to 5 in the morning, because there's no call for service, we've been setting up key areas in the neighborhood here in District 6 just to see who's prowling out there at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. We've been very successful since we started this about a month ago. We made 5 arrests, and as we all know, I'm not going to say anything. The big elephant in the room is most of them are transients along the creeks and other encampments. So we're still on top of that, trying to stay with it. At least now they know that we're out there. Officers are walking the trails. They're hiding their vehicles so we can catch anybody. The other big thing around the Safeway is the street racers. And so we partnered up with CHP and partnered up with San Jose Police Department because they've got a street race team detail. So on March 19th, we're going to train 1 sergeant and 9 officers on how to conduct a street racing enforcement. And one of the big components about that is the CHP will actually come in and show us how to inspect the vehicle. And if we find it's a modified vehicle, we can actually put a DMV sticker on it, which basically means that car cannot leave, it's got to be towed, and they cannot get their tags are taken, and the only way they can bring it back is they got to bring that vehicle to compliance. And what happens with this is sometimes bringing that vehicle to compliance could be up to $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000, you know. So it is something we're going to do. We're going to do a couple of details. When we see the street racers coming up over the Safeway parking lot, we'll go ahead and do some checkpoints down there, pull some vehicles that we believe to be modified, and kind of put the word down there that we're going to be doing that Safeway, down at Kmart and various areas, and Salinas to try to curb that. We're partnering with the Sheriff's Department and with CHP on working on that. The thing for us, for the police department, is that, and I've said it before, we can only do so much. The ones that are really helping us are all the eyes and ears that we have in the community. And we do it through neighborhood watch meetings, and we attend. Where's Andy Ortega? If you raise your hand, she's one of them. You know, sets us up. I don't want to say the citizens, but there's a couple of citizens that notified me next door. I posted my cell phone number. A good story. I don't know if she's here, but she gave me a call. She was walking her dog, ran into an encampment that had maybe 10, 15 bicycles. She called me up. We went down there and did kind of a compliance check. Couldn't determine any of the bicycles were stolen, but at least we were able to identify that person because obviously you got the bikes from somewhere. So overall, what we need to do with the community is that you need to contact us. I have some business cards. If you want my number at the end, I got email. I'm pretty good at it, answering it. But again, the only way we're going to be able to do is you need to work with us, and we're here for you. All right? Thank you.
All right, next up we have David Jacobs from our Public Works. He's the Public Works Director.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight, most of you folks are probably interested in what kind of projects the Public Works Department is going to be doing in District 6 over the next couple of years. We did have a presentation, but it looks like we're having technical difficulties right now. But one of the major projects that we have going on is East Miranda Road. We're in the design phase. We're actually finishing up on phase one. Phase one will be from Dartmouth to McKinnon, and we're planning to be out to bid on that project probably somewhere this year and get under construction by the end of the year. The other two phases, phase two is from McKinnon to Tividat, and then the Tividat to Hemingway. Those projects will follow directly after phase one is done, probably one each year until it's completely done, hopefully in 2021. The next project that we have going on in District 6 is a slurry seal program. We're expecting that to actually start up this March. We have several streets that are going on. Been easier to show you on the map. But there is quite a few streets that are going to be sealed slurry starting in March. We also have San Juan Grade Road improvements. We're going to grind and overlay that street. We're looking at doing from Veranda to Russell Road. Again, that's going to be this summer when we're going to do that project. And then we also have a new traffic signal at Constitution and La Quisitas, and that is going to be fall of 2019 when we get under construction on that project. We have a Safe Routes to School project on Alvin, Laurel, and Linwood Drive. Basically, road diet on Alvin Street, putting in better crosswalks, high visibility crosswalks in areas of schools. And that's a Safe Routes to School program. Additional projects we have going on, Cherokee and North Main Street. We're planning on putting a signal there. That is actually privately funded by the shopping center. We expect that to be this summer, that's going to be going in. We have pedestrian crossing enhancement at Natividad and Pacheco Street, And then we're also lowering the speed limit on the Natividad from 45 to 40. So those are the CIP projects that we have going on in District 6. As well as those projects, we do have maintenance crews that go around patching roadways and doing sidewalk repairs. If you see those guys out working, they're part of the Public Works program. They're the guys in the field doing the field art work, while the engineers are in the office doing these design projects, and we can actually bid them out. So, thank you.
All right, next up we have Megan Hunter. She's going to be doing both the code enforcement and the building planning and community development. So she's going to be taking up the time for both of those.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the Community Development Director, and I realize that a lot of people don't know what we do. We get sometimes confused with library and community services, and we love them. We work very closely with them, but we're a little different. I'm just going to go through. We have 6 divisions in our departments, including code enforcement, which I know is a favorite of many folks. But our 6 divisions include a division called Plan and Project Implementation. We do a lot of the smaller community planning efforts. Right now we're working in Chinatown and the Alisal, but also with the project and plan implementation, we do a lot of economic development implementation, focus on infill development. So there are some sites that we're working on in District 6. And there's some small business owners that we work with in District 6 to help get small businesses growing and operating. The other division that we have is advanced planning, and I think a lot of people have heard about the West Area Specific Plan and the Central Area Specific Plan, and those are the housing developments that are proposed north of Miranda. The West Area Specific Plan, we're close to releasing our draft environmental impact report for that area. And that would include a proposal for about 4,000 homes. Now, I do want to let people know that the build-out of both the West Area Specific Plan and the Central Area Specific Plan will take a lot of time. This is like a 20 to 30 year project. We do have some developers that will probably in the next 2 years have maps, but we don't really anticipate more than 200 to maybe 300 homes maybe 2 years from now at a time being built. So it will be built slowly over time. Some of you may be familiar with Montebello developments. It will be, a similar kind of spread in terms of the development phase. That project is being closely coordinated with the improvements to Baranda Road. So just to let you know that we are working hand in hand with Public Works to ensure that that development can work in that area. The central area specific plan, we expect, again, it's a little less than 4,000 homes, and there is some small commercial development as well. We anticipate that will follow probably 3 to 4 months behind the West area specific plan. Our goal is to entitle both of those areas. That means it would allow developers to start pulling maps and doing track housing development probably in the next 6 to 8 months. So probably by the summer, they'll have the opportunity to start providing us with maps. So just let you know, that is one of the major developments going on. Once we complete those 2 specific plan areas, our team will start with the general plan. And the general plan is like your development constitution for the city. So we will be working with everyone across the city to really look at what our development is currently and what we want to change in the future. So that's up and coming, and you'll hear from us soon. We also are point for the census, and we're helping coordinate the census to make sure that the city is accurately counted. Representation for the city and funding for the city is dependent on our population. So the census, making sure we have an accurate count is really important. The other thing we do is permitting and current planning. How many people have visited 65 West Alisal, the permit center? A few of you. That's where our offices are located, so if you want to swing by and say hi. We have a public counter there that is open Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, and if you ever need to get a permit for your roof or a sign permit, the finance department is there, so if you ever are doing your garage sale and you need a permit, that's where you go. And so just so you know, in District 6, we had about 380 permits pulled over the last year. So there is, activity, definitely mostly residential activity, but some of the bigger projects that were permitted in your district include the new Lowe's building that was just recently developed. And we have a lot of kind of commercial activity. District 6 includes part of Hardin Ranch, some of the Hardin Ranch developments too. The Targets that was recently revamped, that's in our district. So those are some of the bigger permits that we did. We also do housing and community development. We, through our HUD funds, we get some funding from the federal government to fund community services. We focus on vulnerable populations, which include youth and families, seniors, and homeless. So like one example of something that we fund citywide is we help seniors with their taxes. We provide funding to the organization that helps seniors do taxes to make sure that seniors get their full amount. I don't know, has anyone heard of Girls Inc.? Yes? Okay, that's a program that we fund. So that's another example. And then we also invest in housing projects. The city is required to provide access opportunities for affordable housing. We help fund some of the affordable housing projects. Most of our recent projects are near Chinatown. We funded the Housing Authority to do the Haciendas project There are 191 units that have been developed over a period of about 6 years in that community that the city funded. And more recently, we have our first permanent supportive housing project in Monterey County that will be in Chinatown. And that's 90 units of single occupancy. And then finally, I left the best for last, code enforcement, because everyone loves code enforcement. Code enforcement, as many of you know, is very active in District 6. I think we had about 300 cases this past year. Lorenzo, many of you have met Lorenzo. He is our code enforcement manager. Our motto is compliance through outreach. Compliance through education and outreach. And they're often at community meetings, and they like to really take an approach of working with community groups as partners. We don't like to do citations. Citations is the last route. We try to gain voluntary compliance. They have been really active, and we are looking at some changes to our ordinances to give us a little bit more authority to deal with some nuisance, blighted, and vacant properties. The city attorney is looking to bring forward some ordinances which will give us more tools so we can address some of the issues more effectively and quickly. And I don't know, Lorenzo, do you have anything to add? Oh, Megan Hunter.
Megan, I was noticing you mentioned a lot of different projects, but you haven't said not worried about homeless shelters.
Yeah, we're not at that point yet. We're going through.
Is it on here?
There's a Q&A, but it's down at the bottom of the agenda.
That's Q&A.
Q&A at the bottom. Excuse me. This is our meeting. This is the norms and stuff like that. This is our meeting. Okay. We have a agenda. Okay. And on here we have a Q&A towards the end of the meeting. So right now what we have is we're going to go ahead and go to the collaborative session on the glows and grows. And this is my wife, and she's going to explain what the grows and grows mean. Excuse me. And then we're going to go ahead and break you up into groups as far as putting down the things.
An opportunity to get to the microphone and talk about what we're really paying here and not go all around the county because that's exactly what you're doing.
Okay, so then,
I agree.
so maybe this is a good opportunity then. Please, thank you. The grows and glows, the whole point of the grows and glows is so we can write our concerns. You guys can write your concerns as a group, so all voices can be heard. After that, the process is we'll see everybody's concerns and prioritize that way. If that's one of the things that you guys want to discuss, then maybe we'll just write it down. And when the Q&A comes, is there another?
Yeah, I think residents here came to discuss this. I know myself, for everybody to break out is into sections and write their ideas down. Doesn't let everybody else in the room know what they're thinking or what their questions are. I think the most public way to go about this, since we have our other elected officials here, John Phillips, and we've got the mayor here, and we have our overall community discourse, you to allow the community to go to the microphone and ask their questions. I think that is the most fair route. Since we live here, and let's just cut to the chase, that's why we're here.
Okay, well, there is a session for questions.
Am I right?
And I appreciate your opinion, and
I'd like to say one thing too. You said this is our meeting. I'd like to see a raise of hands of who would like to talk about the homeless shelter tonight. We'd like to have our meeting too.
Right.
Stephanie.
Go up to the microphone so we can hear you.
So we can structure a meeting that way. Then maybe we need to plan a meeting to be specifically to the homeless shelter if that's. I was just trying to ride you guys as far as it grows and close.
But Tony, are you hiding behind your wife?
Excuse me. Okay, you know, you're being very disrespectful in this. I understand that, and I'm just supporting
Real quick, okay, we have the agenda set up because the thing is that we have you for the close and growth. We appreciate you being real respectful, Margaret, but we need to move on. We're going to give you guys a chance. The thing is about the grows and glows are opportunities for you to speak with your people at your group and write those down, and also to find out what the city's doing right. So when we get back together, that's when we're going to be doing the Q&A. We didn't set the agenda in a format that Mrs. Margaret would like, but unfortunately, this is what we have. This is what we set it up. You're going to get that opportunity that she's talking about. You're going to be able to go and talk with your peers.
Do that right now.
We're getting to the point. Excuse me. With the agenda that's set up there right now, is that what we're going to do right now? You're going to get together with your community and you're going to be talking with your things, okay? And then write your concerns down, Jeff. Sir, that's what we're talking about. We're giving you the opportunity. Now we're going to get back there and do it. So, if you're at a table, you got 15 minutes. We're going to be respectful of people's time. You have 15 minutes to write down issues that you feel are important to you, and then in the next 15 minutes, we're going to come back and we're going to write them down, what are important for everyone. Okay. We have people here for the county. Judge Phillips is here, the mayor's here, and they'll be able to answer the questions that you have as far as with the heat money, because they have more information to provide for you. And then we fact on the facts and stuff. Because a lot of this information is being spread out there, it's been on the news, and we're going to move forward. And if you have questions, put it on your closing throats, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to have that taken care of. So you'll have your opportunity. So right now,
Take a vote.
Judge Phillips is in the back. Why doesn't he come over here as well? And why doesn't the mayor come over here as well? If you're going to come into our community, do it right. Stand right here and face the community, because you guys made these decisions and never once did you take into account what this community thought. Never once did you put this out in Spanish, in English, not through an electricity bill, not through a water bill. You had a meeting at the Pal Center in South Salinas, and now we've got 2 jails over here, and now you want to impact us even more. We just had a shooting at Safeway. Do you really care about this community? You don't. Somebody could have been hurt when the Judge Phillips.
as far as with
quiet down. Quiet down. You're the most disrespectful person I've ever met.
Hey, we need information. Information.
We agree with her. We agree with her.
Hello, Margaret. Let's have the discussion that you all want to have. Let's talk about the homeless shelter, but let's do it in a respectful way. Let's not scream over each other. Let's hear what everyone has to say, and then we'll move on with that topic. So Megan's gonna give some statistics. She's gonna talk about the shelter, and then we'll do Q&A.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to start off with where we are at. So as many people know, the city and county entered into a memorandum of understanding to work together towards the construction of a permanent year-round shelter at 855 East Laurel with housing, permanent supportive housing at 1220 Natividad. We have begun discussions. Our intention is to do a community meeting to bring folks together to talk about the homeless shelter, specifically the operations of 855 East Laurel. What we're doing currently, right now, is we are working on things to kind of determine, you know, what the soil is like, you know, what some basic information so that we can come back and share what our findings are and what the process would be with the community to talk more about operations and things that you all care about. The city and county will work jointly together to submit an application for the heat funding. We have not yet done so. The notice of funding availability is not even out the door yet.
Excuse me, what was that check? Mr. Alejo was
It's 12 million.
So the check, and I can explain that to you. And you know, if you all don't mind raising your hands, and I can call on you and answer the questions. So the way that the funding works from the state is that each jurisdiction received a specific allocation based on the number of homeless. In the case of Monterey, and it's based on your continuum of care. So there are many continuum of cares in the state of California. In our area, our continuum of care includes San Benito and Monterey County. That money is based on our point in time count that was conducted in 2017. The state allocated that money just based on that. So we had allocated specifically for us about $12.5 million. Now of that, Monterey County has a larger homeless population, so we have about a 10 million share for Monterey County, and the other share goes to San Benito County based on our own kind of homeless count. So that's the money. The application that was put together was very generic and talked about funding categories. The Leadership Council of the Continuum of Care, which several service providers, philanthropy, and our mayor sits on the Leadership Council, and so does Supervisor Alejo, allocated more portion for capital improvements. That's 65% of that funding, because they understood that this is one-time funding only, and if we're just supporting programs over time, it's not really going to make a difference. So the idea of the funding is for capital improvement projects, 65%. We have 10% for unaccompanied homeless, which is 18 to 24, 5% for homeless youth, and homeless youth is defined a little differently. In the school system, it can be based on overcrowded conditions, like people who are doubled up, where they don't have secure housing, or it can be based on if you're on the street, so it kind of has a wider. And then 15% for services, and then 5% for admin. So that's kind of, that's all that has been decided. There will be competitive process. The Continuum of Care will run that process. They have not submitted the request for proposals yet. And so the city would work with the county to submit a proposal for the homeless shelter. And there may be other homeless shelters that will submit for funding. San Benito, someone asked about San Benito. San Benito does have a year-round shelter, and they have invested the resources, and they are planning on applying for funding for other capital improvements.
I see some hands raised over here.
Yeah, I know that Hannah, well, I knew that I'll be
I got a question right now.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do Q&A. We're going to go ahead and do Q&A, but I want to reference everyone to our rules. We all came up with, let's be respectful, stay on the agenda topic when we're going through this. So, it's your turn. What's your question?
Give him the microphone.
Main groups who have
Give him the microphone.
this area for for moving the homeless shelters permanently over here. Do you know the 5 groups?
I don't know.
So I don't know about any 5 groups.
Okay,
I just, let me.
Give him the microphone.
But you asked me the question, so am I responding to your question?
Yes, you do know, but you won't say it.
No, so here is the situation. The city and the county have been working for years and years. We've had, as many people know, we've had a temporary warming shelter. A temporary warming shelter. An emergency warming shelter that's only been open for a short period of time. And we have moved, because we haven't had a permanent home, we have had to move from temporary space to temporary space to temporary space. Right now, the warming shelter is at, I forget the address, but it's on, I think it's 121.
111.
Yeah, it's across from the post office, across from the county building on Alisal. So I think it's 121, but I'm not exactly sure. So the city and the county have been always looking to see where an appropriate location would be. And when there was an opportunity for funding, we had to look and see what met the zoning criteria. And one of the things that meets the zoning criteria is publicly owned property. So we looked at the publicly owned property, the city property, and the county property. And given all of the conditions, that site was selected as a place that we would like to work jointly together towards the homeless shelter.
I have a question. There's a question, Margaret.
Okay, so you mentioned the temporary shelter. In the documentation as of March of last year, the temporary shelter, as soon as the permanent shelter is functional, the permanent shelter is supposed to absorb into the permanent shelter. And so there's a capacity of like 100 people. There's supposed to be a capacity of 80 at the shelter, which is mainly now for families and women. Men are being turned away, so there's enough room for the families and privacy and such. So what is our net value of how many people we're going to be serving for as much money as we're going to be doing? And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but at the same time, how many people are new people? Because if we put 80 people over from the temporary shelter and we can only hold 100, that's only 20 new people.
So, great question. So the location where the temporary shelter is right now, those buildings are beyond their lifespan. They will not, we can't continue to use those structures. They are temporary, modular structures, and we need a safe, permanent homeless shelter. And you're right. What we know is best practice and what we've told the community and what we're kind of planning for the permanent shelter is between 80 to 100 people. This cannot be the shelter that serves the entire county. We know that.
And don't sell it as a solution.
We need additional shelters, and so we are working with other areas. Seaside is looking at building a shelter over there. San Benito has expanded and has now a permanent shelter. We kind of are looking to follow the San Benito model. But more importantly, shelter is only a bridge. Shelter is only part of the continuum of housing. The answer is housing. That's what the governor is saying. That's why there's funding being put towards housing. So that is why when you look at the memorandum of understanding, we're looking at the homeless shelter, but we're also looking at building housing at 1220 Natividad because we know that we have to, in the region, build housing. And in terms, the county understands this too. They had a meeting yesterday to talk about a housing strategy for the county and how they too are going to build a more affordable housing across across the county. And just for some of you who know that the Salinas plan calls out for the need for 4,000 units of affordable housing. The homeless population, the growth in homelessness has really occurred for people who are losing their jobs, who are already doubled up in one little circumstance is putting them on the street. We recently at the warming shelter that we have now, just 2 weeks ago, a family of 9 who were displaced because they were doubled up in overcrowded housing and ended up there. They would have ended up on the street. They had no place to go. So this is the type of, the shelter enables us to help find those folks the housing they need.
If you have 2,000 people, you're going to need a lot more shelters.
There's close to 4,000.
Okay, my question is, so you say you tackle lines and everything, explain everything you want, whatever. The thing over here is that community where those spaces are going to be established were never taken into consideration. The only thing that you guys took into consideration is where we're going to spend this money because we don't want to let it go. 65% to a building instead of 65% to a service, I think it would be better than 10% because they need more services than other things. And that's the reason why I don't understand where you all this. You guys come with all these nice words, all this we doing all this, like it's going to serve this, it's going to serve that. But you don't take into consideration how all this is going to impact the community that are around you. You don't care about safety, you don't care about the kids, you don't care about this. Sorry. I just want to ask you, what is it that you take into consideration before you decide for these sites?
So what I'm going to say is we took into consideration the site. Because if you look at the proposed shelter location, and this is as a crow flies, this is not based on walking or driving. The closest location is Acosta Plaza, which is more than 1/3 of a mile away. That's the closest residence. So it's not like we're locating this next door to a residence. So that was part of the consideration. However, I did want to, the thing that what is happening in Salinas is that everyone in the community is suffering from unmanaged homelessness. People are not getting services, there's not street outreach, people don't have homes.
Cops keep pushing people around.
There is not services, and I agree with you, and that's why we are allocating resources to services. We're looking, the shelter is part of an overall plan that does include services. We are looking at housing assistance. For example, we fund a program called HRC. And what they do is they do rapid rehousing. And they help people with down payment assistance so they don't end up homeless. So there are a lot of services that we're providing. And I think there is an opportunity to look at how to use our resources better to address that aspect. But right now, the people who will live in the shelter will be, on site, will be managed, will receive case management service, will be helped to move to the housing. So it's not people who are going to be floating around. These are people. They're not, like I said, she has.
I have 3 questions, if you don't mind. My first one, will there be a police department substation at around 855 East Laurel? Yes or no?
So I will say no, but listen, I haven't finished. Right now, currently, and I encourage people to go to the existing temporary warming shelter and take a look at how that is operating. They have security there all the time. And I work basically across the street. I can see what's going on there. I go often at night, and there's security. You don't see any folks wandering around, and so the plan, the operations plan includes security.
The city council meetings, and you asked the mayor said we are getting a substation. that correct or not?
What was said was, part of the grant money that we're writing for will include police services and security at that facility, which will put an officer in that area and will help us keep the area along the soccer fields clear, and we'll be moving forward at that time. What's your next question?
How much of an influence does Taylor's Farm have?
None. They aren't the people complaining about the homeless downtown. It's kind of shocking, I know. And downtown, our problem hasn't been, we have more security downtown than anywhere else in the city, and the problem has been getting these folks into services that aren't provided downtown. The what's closing? Dorothy's Kitchen is not closing.
I'm walking your way.
What about the 5 groups that agree?
I'm sorry, there's someone behind you who wanted to ask a question.
Yeah. What about the 5 groups agree to 2017 in the fall?
Excuse me?
So you were talking about impacts to soil and stuff, and I haven't heard anybody talk about the impacts to our neighborhood. The things that you're locating a shelter right next to the soccer fields, and just before I retired, my job in Santa Cruz, if you've ever gone over there by their shelter or their services over there around Coral Street, you've got the homeless that are hanging around there, you have discarded hypodermic needles, you've got human waste, you have all these things, and we have these public parks, trails that all our school kids walk on. And what is going to be done with police enforcement to keep homeless from setting up camps along the creek there that goes right through the middle of our neighborhood, our trails, and the kids that travel along that. And it's nice, and I totally sympathize with the people that are homeless, and you brought up some of the tragic situations, I get that. But there's also people out there that are criminals, possible, that have some mental issues, and they're also going to be out there. What's going to be done to protect our neighborhood from the increased population of these types of people that are in our neighborhood? And I have one more comment I'd like to make. Today, even at the Safeway, I saw a homeless person just ripping the trash can bag out of the trash can out there in front of the Safeway with no regards to what was spilling out all over the place. And the increased shoplifting that Safeway has to deal with, and the impact on the businesses, because that's going to it'll be a magnet, and it'll bring them there to this shelter, but there's going to be an area around there that they need to go when they're turned out during the day, and where is that going to end up? It's going to be in our neighborhood, and along our area. And so
Thank you. I want to give the opportunity for...
I'd like to hear about the impacts to the neighborhood and what is going to be done to deal with those issues.
Thank you.
We want to be partners to make sure you don't experience those impacts. So I would like to say that it's a partnership, it's a collaboration. And in terms of what you're talking about, in terms of around the neighborhood, the homeless that you're talking about, that is homelessness that we're dealing with at a citywide level, that we're working with, for example, library and community services that deals with the parks, to see if there's a better way to address those folks. Because many of those folks don't come to the shelter, aren't going to be in the shelter, really, truthfully. And so we're looking at ways that we can improve security. Because of the homeless shelter that's there, we will have, as the mayor mentioned, we will actually have significant security allocated to the neighborhood that we don't have right now. Because of virtue, I mean, if you
didn't say to the neighborhood, you said to the shelter.
If you look at how we have been operating the warming shelter, there is pretty significant significant security that goes pretty well around the neighborhood to make sure that there aren't those types of impacts. And so we do have kind of constant security. And as the mayor indicated, you know, that there would be a police presence. And we actually have, the police have already allocated a homeless outreach team officer who's going to be specializing in working with the homeless. So that is one thing. The other thing you mentioned, if we're going to turn them out during the day, what we kind of universally have heard from the neighborhood is that you want us to provide 24-hour services so that those, that when the shelter never closes, so people are supposed to be receiving case management and classes on site. The other thing that we've heard from the neighborhood is that you want transportation provided. So people aren't coming in through the neighborhoods to the shelter. And so we're committed to operating it very similar to how 65, or I'm sorry, I keep saying the wrong address, I think it's 121 East Alisal is operated. With the exception, they don't have transportation. With that exception, we're looking at including transportation into the operations plan. But it is a partnership, and where we have visited a number of shelters in the Bay Area, in Southern California, and the key to success, you wouldn't even know that they were a shelter. The key to the success is working hand in hand with the community to really minimize any potential impacts. And I think we're open in those discussions we know we plan to have in the next upcoming months. What is it that we need? Transportation, is that something that you all want? You know, how can we ensure that the neighborhood is protected? What kind of design would you like? What kind of things do we need to incorporate? So on the parks issue, we do know about Natividad Creek Park. We had a lot of cleanup costs associated with that. We are also investing in the soccer fields. So it's in our best interest to work with our services, police, the fire department, code enforcement, which also deals with private encampments, and our social service providers to ensure that we can reduce that impact. Even now we're looking at how to effectively deploy those teams.
Maybe a little due respect, the city has gone about that backwards. The meeting that you're having out in your city, you're also saying that you're planning to work with the community, the city is planning to work with the community moving forward, but the city hasn't done due diligence in having transparent meetings with this community. What I hear is we've made a decision, and now we're going to work with you after you get to make up the rights in the carpet. But we've already got enough take and try along the river. We've already got, Virginia Rock Water was a shutdown. I believe it was yesterday because there was a homeless person that went in and was getting in there with the kids, and they had to put the whole place in lockdown. We had a shooting over here. Police officers luckily didn't kill the guy, but it was a lot of bullets that was sprayed. And somebody there could have been killed. So you're telling us that you're going to increase police. We don't want to increase police. We want everybody else to take their share. I have been to the meetings in Monterey. I've been to the meeting where Gunter was telling all the truth to the people in Monterey. And we've been called in meetings. We have 2 county jails that we moved here.
All right, Margaret, we've made it a political speech, so let me answer some of the questions. I don't appreciate your rudeness. First of all, the rest of these people have questions. I will see you in 18 months at the polls. So let's move on to what's council. First of all, we started this process, and we don't have the money allocated to the city. There are 11 people on this panel that vote. I have 1 vote. You have the mayor of Seaside, you have the mayor of Gonzales, you have... That's nice. But the panel that makes this decision is 11 people, and it isn't just me. There is $6,500,000. They're going to open up a shelter in Seaside. We don't know how much that's going to cost. We made it up with a pump tent. We don't know how much money is going to be available. I've heard we built a shelter. I was at a meeting where some people were saying there were stakes in the ground, we've already done this. Well, first of all, that's not true. There has been no decision even what kind of a building it is. So, when I hear people say that we built it, and we've already put it in place, this is not true, and people are just spreading rumors that aren't true. We're trying to figure out where we're going with this. We're building 90 units on Soledad Street. I've heard we should keep them on Soledad Street. The plan is to get people off the street, get them out of your neighborhoods, keep them from breaking into houses. We don't have any available land in the city that belongs to the city, but we would have used that. So, the county graciously said, try to use this land. They don't want that shelter there permanently. They eventually want to build a rather large building to house their public works department. Nobody's talked about that. It seems other people have already made their decisions, and it's nice that we have a lot of experts in this room, because I'm surely not the expert on homeless, but we have a lot of work to do to decide where we go. We want these folks off the street. I don't want them in your neighborhoods. We don't want them in any neighborhood. We don't want them laying in front of businesses. That's where we're going with this. So when I hear people say, oh, you're putting all the homeless on your street, well, let me tell you what, that's not true. We've got more people downtown. We have more people living on Salinas Street, and we're not done.
Where do you live?
We are not done yet. Sorry.
Right as you go.
Go ahead, do you have a question?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have lived in this area since 1967, when it was a farming community. My first husband was actually farming the area. And so when they opened up the area for housing, one of the things that attracted us immediately was the creek, the trees, just the beautiful area. And so when we had a chance to move our family home, finally, after saving enough money, having the equity, we moved the family home in 2000 from Magnolia and John Street. And the schools, the whole area was so beautiful. And that's what I would like for everyone to think about is, this is our community. We've had beautiful years living here. We've been very, very safe. Now all of a sudden we've had an increase in crime. Thanks to our Salinas Police Department, there has been where they've mitigated. And even that shooting, I'm not going to say that they should have shot the guy. If you pull a gun on somebody, hey, you pulled a gun on somebody, even if it was a toy gun or a plastic gun. But our officers need to go home. But our areas, we've taken care of our homes. These are our retirement homes. I won't be around in 20 years to see what's happening in the area, but I would like to be able to preserve that beautiful creek. We've lost a lot of trees now to keep everything clean. But that's just a thought, is that when we first bought here and came to this area, we bought it for the environment and how it looked. Thank you.
One thing too that we are looking at with that in mind is we are looking at a program that is called Downtown Streets Team or something very similar. And basically it employs folks who are homeless to clean areas. And I know in San Jose, they were extremely effective in cleaning the creek beds. I can't remember, but they were the largest clean up. I want to say they cleaned up like over 7 tons of trash from the creek bed in 1 year. And they won an award for the most effective kind of urban waterway cleanup. So we would love to work with you on partnering on some of these ideas that we think would be perfect for Creek Bridge that could really make a difference in the creek bed and help with some of those issues.
Questions?
Buenas noches. Nuestras escuelas se van a ver afectadas con este proyecto. Ayer precisamente en la escuela, en la oficina de trabajo, pasó algo muy preocupante. 2 personas saltaron las cestas del campo de deporte de nuestros niños.
Use the microphone, please.
Our schools are going to be affected. Just yesterday, an incident very concerning happened at Virginia Martin School.
They went into Virginia Rock Memorial through the back, so they jumped the gate.
Estas personas venían en un estado de drogadicción, so entraron a la cafetería de nuestros niños a la hora de lunch.
And they went into the cafeteria when our children were having lunch.
Tomaron comida de los containers, los niños tuvieron que ser evacuados.
So the people that came in took food from the containers. The kids had to be evacuated.
Tuvieron que ser llevados a sus salones y cerrar con llave, porque estas personas empezaron a quitarse sus pertenencias.
And the children had to be taken into the classroom and then lock the doors because those people started to take off their belongings.
Mi pregunta es, ¿qué solución nos van a dar a nosotros con este incidente que está pasando ya? Todavía no se construye el proyecto y ya están las consecuencias.
So what I want to know is what is going to be done for things like this because the shelters are not in there yet and we're still already seeing consequences.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we are really fortunate. We have, I think I saw the police chief who is here. They allocated a homeless outreach team officer specifically, I think, to start looking at how we can address these issues. And so maybe she wants to talk a little bit about how that could work. So I don't want to steal her thunder.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, we just started what we call a HOT program, a homeless outreach team. But right now we have one officer dedicated to doing this, and as I spoke with the CAS group this morning, Community Alliance for Safety and Peace, and I talked a little bit about HOT. I also told them, and I will share with you, that we do not have a very, very specific approach that we're going to take because we are using a model that we learned about from Tampa, Florida, and Salinas is not Tampa, so we want an opportunity to kind of experiment with what we're doing and tweak and customize our approach to homeless outreach, law enforcement, and homelessness to suit the needs of this community. And even the needs of, like right now we're starting in Chinatown, the needs of any neighborhood that we go to. So the concept is that we know that we're some of the most difficult to treat and difficult to reach homeless people are due to mental illness and substance abuse long-term, issues that are pretty complex and challenging. And that often accompany the need for an officer to be involved. So why not, get straight to it and have the officer develop a relationship and get in very deep with this faction of our community so we can start solving some problems. So that is a very, very general 3-minute overview. Follow us and we'll see where this goes. We do plan on expanding the program. We've done a lot of work in just 1 week with what we have, and we're going to go where the need is. I don't know because I'm not in charge of this meeting. Give me a second.
I just want to know, what's the priority for this meeting for the homeless? I know that incidents around these towns are greater than that. I'm sure they're not at the top priority, but a lot of these previous issues. We should understand.
What is our priority when it comes to homelessness? Well, and I kind of heard a little bit there at the end about, well, I'm sure there are much bigger issues. And you're right, there are some issues that rise to a grave level of seriousness. However, if you've been watching our crime rate, we're trying very hard to change that. We're trying to change what we've all been feeding into. This is a violent city, you know, a lot of bad things happen here. Well, every city across the country has a lot of bad things happening. So we're working very hard at reducing crime. We're expanding our department as much as we can, as much as our budget will allow us to do so responsibly. We're partnering with federal agents, we're partnering with state, and we've done a lot of work this past year to work toward the reduction of violent crime. So we stay fluid with our priorities. Our priority was reducing violent crime. It still is. Homelessness is right up there with it. Because let's face it, we have a large population of people with needs that we have not figured out how to best treat and serve long term. They are a vulnerable population. I learned that very quickly here. When you have tents, when you have bullets flying, and guess what? Tents are not going to stop bullets. We want to stop the bullets, and we want to also fortify the environment for our people.
One thing, too, quickly, I just wanted to go back to the school point, which is, I think we are very interested in working with the school system. There's actually homeless coordinators and looking at how we can bring the resources together. We have 9,000 homeless youth in Monterey County. The top 12 schools with homelessness over 20%. This is both street homeless but also doubled up, are in the city of Salinas. So that is why so many people at the homeless shelter are families. Many of them are referred by the schools. So we also want to see if we can help with those issues, making sure that, you know, if there's mental illness, we can refer the program interim to Virginia Roca to help manage some of those incidences. So that would be an example of a partnership that we might be able to have.
Pero yo quiero preguntar, ¿tienes tu... ¿Sí escuchó la respuesta?
Okay. Megan, you talk about this project, the homeless shelter on Laurel, 855 East Laurel, as if it's a done deal, and I've heard it's not a done deal yet, but if you want to work, it sounds very positive that we're going forward. What are we or are we not? That's one question. The other thing is sorry, you gotta excuse me, and maybe this is for David, our fulfilling person. I found yesterday, cracked my tooth, busted my lip, hurt my nose for a cracked sidewalk, but that's why you hear this shush in my mouth. But anyway, you took the zoning into consideration when selecting the shelter at Laurel, yet it's my understanding that you have a hurdle to jump, that you need to get this through to the residents to see what impact they will have. What's the impact to the residents and the community, and how are you going to do that? Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe I'm a positive thinker. It's not a done deal. We are still trying to secure funding. We need to work with the community to make sure that the facility is designed and operated appropriately. So that's work that still needs to be done. And I think there's a willingness from us, and maybe that's what I'm trying to show, to work with the community. Because these, you know, the shelters I've been to work when there's community partnership, and we need to have a community partnership.
That's not this kind of community, though.
I'm John Phillips. I'm chair of the board of the supervisors for the county, and probably amongst everybody here, I'm more responsible for looking at that location on it. So I thought it probably only fair that I tell you how we did it from the county perspective. But frankly, a homeless shelter is something we've needed here for a long time, and the county and the city have been in this thing for a number of years, where we point at the city and say, well, it's your problem. The county says it's your problem. And so the timing of this has been mentioned, but we had to come up with something for some funding that we didn't have if we were going to get some of this heat funding, and it's 12.5 million. We won't get all that for here, but we got a good chance of getting some of it. And so we explored a lot of alternatives, and I personally went out and looked at things, and I was looking at 1220 Natividad. I had some people looking at that building, whether we could convert that building and make it work. It wasn't a big enough site, and that's when we looked to the Laurel site. And the Laurel site has some opportunities, obviously. It's county owned. It's not adjacent, immediately adjacent to residential or business areas. It has a buffer zone. Let me finish, thank you. And it's near services, the hospital, the health, the sheriff, the probation department. Transportation is a problem. And we knew when we looked at that transportation was going to be a problem, that we'd have to provide transportation. Frankly, I got outvoted a bit because my leaning on that was we bring in a sprung structure we put up in 7 weeks. They have in the San Francisco thing, and it's a temporary structure that can be moved. And I'm still not sure, depending on the amount of money, that's one of the things we're looking at, is whether we can do it with a sprung structure, a temporary structure that couldn't be permanent. The anticipated problems that a lot of you see there, and I know what you deal with the homeless along the creek. I know what we deal with in Chinatown. I know what we deal with out in Lapis Road when we had to go and clean up when the homeless is there. But I've been to that structure, the temporary structure, across from my office a number of times at night. It's run by the former supervisor's brother who runs it. It's the people that you're worried about that are going to be coming in aren't the ones that are coming in. It's the people that need it there. Go see that structure sometime and how it's operating. We would keep it there if those buildings were equipped and could be done. So, bottom line is, I mean, we looked at this, and frankly, the county came to the conclusion it was the only conclusion that we thought, the only location we could come up with it. And I've been here before. 30 years ago, I stood over there when we wanted to put the youth the youth center. And Simon Salinas was the chair of the board, and I was the chief judge at that time. And we went and talked to the citizens, and they were all irate with us. We had it at a church building, and they said it was going to be the doom of things. And we said, these are your kids. We have to start addressing your kids and bringing them in. So we have to make decisions. You're right, it's not a done deal. I mean, that's why you get a chance to have your speech, and have your views heard. And I don't deny that, but we have to move forward on shelter here or somewhere, or we're going to lose a lot of money on the shelter that we need. And in this civilized society, some of these people need the services. It's not the ones that are out there, the ones that the chief was talking about. Some of those people, you know, I dealt with one, with a prosecutor for a lot of years, a judge for a lot of years. Those people aren't going to be coming in because they're not going to obey the rules when they have to come in. So,
we're not worried about the ones going into the shelter. We're worried about
we just out in my area in Prudhoe, we just cleared out the Manzanita Park, and we spent 5 or 6. We got our share. But 5 or 6 days of just cleaning up the park when we did this. Anyway, I just thought you ought to hear it from the county's perspective how we got to this location where we were going.
Surgery.
I didn't get your question.
You know, you're talking about San Diego County, but that's over the hill. And I went to the meetings in Monterey, and no one over there has even applied for money. Val isn't applying for any money.
No one has applied yet because the request for proposal is not out.
No, I mean nobody has signed an MOU, Megan, I'm trying to say.
So
except for Salinas, which will take the brunt of everything.
me respond. I just wanted to emphasize something that Yolanda said, because I think that's the crux of what we're talking about. You said you're not worried about the people that are going to the shelter, you're worried about the people that are attracted. And so I think that is the key, and if we can agree on that, then that is something we can build into the security plan, into the operations plan, to discourage people who are not there for the shelter services from coming into the surrounding area. And so that's what I think is a really important thing to note. And in terms of the other plans, one of the things I did want to mention is that we're working with the county and the coalition, the continuum of care, on a new regional plan to address homelessness. Because I think I've heard everyone agrees that the solution has to be regional. And so we are looking. San Benito is doing their part. They did go from a warming shelter to 24-hour shelter. And they're
has to be sufficient as well.
Do more in terms of housing. And so Seaside has also, as the mayor mentioned, is looking at doing the same thing. And so I think the regional plan is the way that we need to address it. Whether it's through housing or other types of shelters, that is some of the things that we have to look at regionally.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and take 2 more questions. We have about 10 minutes. I'm gonna go here and then pink in the back.
So 3 questions.
So 3 questions.
Okay. Well, my question was actually addressed, so I had another follow-up question.
Go ahead.
What is the difference in services that are going to be provided at the homeless shelter between the homeless people that we want to go to the shelter and the homeless people that we don't want to be around the shelter? I'm a little confused about the 2 different types of homeless people.
So I wanted to say that we would work that into the operations plan, but the idea is that we would provide services on site. Right now, the warming shelter is not 24 hours, so people come in and leave. And really what we want is the shelter to be very programmed so that we're helping people move into housing. So we have a strategy for housing. So it won't be just open to anyone dropping in. There'll be actually some kind of management to make sure that the people coming in and cycling through. We will have some case management, and just community homeless solutions is running the current shelter, and the way that they prioritize is they prioritize families first. And so because families are there, it does preclude certain types of individuals from being there. And so because that's the need, we look that the shelter will very much look more like a family shelter with maybe some individual women and men. But it will probably be, as we're seeing now, up 1/3 to up to 2/3 families.
And then I have a question.
Thank you. I have 2 thoughts. One, what if these folks take the MST bus pass? If you've got both one place to another, and have somebody maybe check out the churches. You might have some places where these folks can at least spend the night. Maybe say at 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. or something. So they have a place where they can sleep.
Yeah, so they do actually on the peninsula. They have a program, the Health Program and Gathering for Women, that does have smaller shelter beds at churches. And I do think some programs do provide MST bus passes, but we've also seen some best practices where you contract with MST to provide a van that can help pick up and transport people. And so we are looking at how that transportation would be designed. And so that's, again, feedback from the community we'd like to have.
I'm not a good speaker, but I just want to say, about a year ago, a neighbor called me and said, can you look out the door? That there is a homeless person that set up a tent in front of our area. And it's not a cul-de-sac, it's just a green belt. And I went outside and
came back in and I said to her, what do you want to do? She says, I've already called twice and nobody's come out. Could you call? I said, you betcha. I called twice. Now, by the time the police got out there, he was gone because I had been standing out there for 30 minutes. If that happened a year ago, you let this come in to our neighborhoods, we're going to have a whole lot more and a lot more problems. My grandchildren come to visit. My daughter works for the hospital. They don't really want to come to Salinas anymore. And that hurts. And I was born and raised here.
So again, I think that the shelter is one piece of the continuum. We really need to look at how we can do street outreach and get folks, as I mentioned before, we want to work with the Parks Department to see how we can get case management. And I will mention too that code enforcement does work with private property owners to address the encampments. So I would also encourage you to use Q Alert when you do have encampments for the city to, if you see an encampment for the city to work with you. I think no matter if the shelter is there or not, if we don't address homelessness systematically, we all are going to continue to experience that. I had someone, a homeless person, I left my door unlocked, came in and stole a bunch of stuff out of my car. And it happens a lot. It's challenging in the community, and I think we need to work together to figure out how we can address homelessness, how we have case management, and more importantly, homelessness is caused because people don't have homes. So if we can really get people into the housing, that's really where other communities have been successful in reducing homelessness.
I have one last question, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, and I'll go ahead and give it to Councilmember Villegas for closing.
Okay, my question is, what steps can we do that you can provide us information on how we can stop this from actually happening? That's what we need to know. As a side note, I would like to let our public service know that you are here to serve us. You have to listen to what we say, take into consideration, and actually care about what we say instead of being so defensive and actually kind of stubbornness to actually try to work with us. You're more telling us what's going to happen instead of telling us how we can make a change. So that's a side note to understand.
I would say that a couple of things. Number one, of course, we don't know. The funding hasn't been allocated. But I will say that if we don't provide shelter and housing in our community, the homelessness is going to get worse and worse and worse. The places that have been successful in addressing these issues have had comprehensive homeless programs that include a shelter that offers 24-hour services. And if you want to stop the shelter, let's be honest, who are you hurting? If you go to the current shelter right now, you're talking about families. There are
we gave you your time to speak. Let her finish, and then we
I want people to look at this study that was done. It's called Crisis on the Coast. These are the elementary schools that I'm talking about, and I'll tell you what the homeless populations are. Loma Vista Elementary School, 20%. Los Padres Elementary School, 20%. Salinas Community, 21%. Oscar F. La Jolla, 22%. Monterey Park Elementary, 22%. Fremont Elementary, 22%. Natividad Elementary, 22%.
And how many are going to get housed with the shelter?
Panamint, 23%. Alisal Community, 25%. El Gavilan, 29%. Sherwood, 36%. So I think, you know, it's not a done deal, but we're going to have to build this. We're going to have to build a shelter somewhere. I want to say that if we don't work together to address homelessness, I am telling you, I'm just explaining to you what let me finish. Let me finish. I will answer you.
Everyone, we all came up with norms. We want.
You work for the city, so you shouldn't be taking the heat.
Margaret, I also live in the city. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you all for being here. I'll go ahead and pass it down to Councilmember Villegas.
I appreciate everybody coming here tonight and voicing their concerns. I know some of you did not get a chance to do that. A little monopoly point on there, but that's okay. But what we're going to do is there'll be future meetings, and you'll be able to have an opportunity to come up. And again, thank you for coming, being respectful of people's time. We're past the time. Please come to the council meetings. Voice your concerns.